לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. נגיד בבוקר חסדך, is on page 135, leads into the Baruch Hu, the call to prayer. We read together. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, Ha'el HaMelech HaKadol VaKadosh V'Shemayim V'Aretz. Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu, V'Elohei Avoteinu, Shir Ushvacha, Halel Zimra, Brachot V'Hodoot, Me'ata V'ad Olam, Baruch Atah Adonai, Abocher B'Shirei Zimra. Pages 136 and 137 together, the first paragraph in Hebrew and the second one in English. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, osei shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha b'rachamim, u'tuvo v'chadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh b'reshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chokhma asita, mal haaretz kinyanecha. Yitbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, al mo'oreo she'asita, yifa'arucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Yoseh Amorot. Great is your love for us, eternal God,
and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you, and proclaim your unity.
we pray.
Praise you, O God, in love you have called your people Israel to serve you.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Hashem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levacha v'chol nafshecha v'chol ma'atecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mesavecha hayom al levanecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shirtecha b'beitecha v'lechtecha b'derech v'shochtecha b'unecha v'shatam ot al yadecha v'hayu lo totokot eleinecha v'tachatam al mezuzot beitecha v'yishanecha. Aman tisraru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim להיות לכם אלוהים, אני We read together, good and beautiful and true.
Sound established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, eternal one, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer. As you are the God and Redeemer of our ancestors, you are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. You have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
Israel, Aleinu Adonai, Sevaot Shema. rise to the Amidah. Adonai Sefatita Ufia Yitehilatecha. Eternal God, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor Va'anora, Hail Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevii Geula Livnei B'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo V'yahava. Melech Hozer u'Mashiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah, Gibor la'olam Adonai, Mechayei metim ata rav l'Hoshia, Mashiv haruach u'morid hageshem, Mazriach hashemesh u'morid hatar, Mechalkel chaim b'chesed, Mechayei metim v'rachamim rabim, Somer noflim ברופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו ישני עבר מי כמוך ועל גבולות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמרת לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. קדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאיך. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם. מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. נמלוך אדוני לעולם וחי לציון לתורתו הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושיבך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Let us read together. Inspire our ancestors to hallow this day for your service.
When upon his coming we pause to contemplate our life, learn we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day, for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and concentrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and right.
We
Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Shabbat. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. Now on pages 144 and 145, with the final part of the Amidah, which are thanksgiving prayers. The first, now for worship, but originally, of course, was adoration of the former temple sacrificial system, obviously edited out of the earliest liberal prayer books and remain edited out. Middle is the Modim prayers, is known for its first Hebrew word, a general thanksgiving, and then a prayer for peace. And I'd like 3 different people, each to read one. In Hebrew or English as you choose, so I'm just looking round. The first voice I see. Thank you. 1. 2. No, was 3. 3. Thank you.
So
starting at the top of page 144,
yeah.
And we'll all join in Hebrew and English what's called the Chatimot. Chatam is a signing off. So what we know colloquially is the Baruch atah Adonai are the signings off. And this is originally because when the liturgy was first created, the preacher or the lead, that wasn't the preacher, the Shaliach Tzibur, the leader of the community, could basically say what they liked, but they had to come back to the Baruch atah Adonai because then everybody would say, Amen, I believe in what the person's just said. Now originally our liturgy wasn't fixed as it is today. An order got fixed, so you knew what was coming, but the exact wording, at least if it was, has been lost. So we'll all join in to the Baruch atah Adonai in Hebrew and English when we get there.
Rutzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amaha Yisrael utafilatam ba'ahava tekabel utahi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael ameha.
Baruch atah Adonai she'otcha levadacha b'yaman na'avod. We praise you, O God, you alone we worship in reverence.
Let's read together. Modim אנחנו לך,
שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו,
מדבר אותנו לעולם ועד. צור חיינו מגן אישנו,
אתה הוא לדור ודור.
נודה לך וסתר תהילתך,
על חיינו המסורים בידיך, על נשמותינו הפקודות לך, על ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, על נפלאותיך וטובתך, שבכל עת ערב ובוקר בצהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due.
I'd like us to pray for peace together in English.
Well, peace, welfare, and
blessing, grace, love, and mercy to us and to all Israel, your people. As the loving parent, bless us with the light of your presence. For by the light of your presence, eternal God, you have revealed to us the law of life, a love of kindness and righteousness, blessing and mercy, life and peace. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all your people be blessed at all times with a good gift.
Baruch atah
Adonai,
Osei
Hashalom. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. Now a few moments of silence for your own prayers. There is, of course, a guided reading on pages 145 and 146. ratzon imrefi, yeyu ratzon imrefi, vehegon libi lefonecha, vehegon libi lefonecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali, Adonai tzuri v'goali. Kriyat HaTorah, the reading of the Torah, on page 481. Page 481. Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Gadolul Adonai iti, Oramama Shemo Yachdav. Seated. We're in last week's portion, so So, we're in a portion that you will know well. We're in God appearing, Vayera. God appears, we learn at the beginning. First words are Vayera Elav Adonai, and Adonai appeared to him, being Abraham. And this portion begins, I think, in chapter 17, but the bit that you'll know very well is the latter part of the portion, the parasha, because it has the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which is my favourite portion, but I'll come back on another day and talk to you about that. The chapter that just precedes it is, of course, the expulsion of Ishmael, the child of Hagar. But we're much earlier on. We're going to read at the very beginning of the portion from, I'm pretty sure it's chapter 17, and a certain number of verses until we decide between us we're going to stop. Is it 18? You're probably right. I don't think about the English chapters. Perfect, it's 18, thank you. Chapter 18, not 17. 17 was the end of... I know why I'm so focused on 17, because 17, my My wife had an adult bar mitzvah. She read chapter 17 last week, so that's why I'm not focused on 17. I'm not going to say very much about 18, except that I'm going to make some comment. The way I read it, I'm going to make some comments as I go through. But the theme is hospitality, as will be made clear both through the reading and should we get to a little Talmudic passage that we might study in the middle of my sermon, subject to time.
I'm sorry, I don't know Roman numerals. Could you tell me what page it's on?
No, he hasn't said.
Oh.
You're right, I haven't said. Let me just find it. You've got a different edition.
86.
I think you've got a different edition here, but let's have a look.
86.
86. There we are, 86, thank you in this version. I think everybody has the same version, do they? Has everybody all got a copy?
86 in the Sonsine.
86, there are 3 Sonsinos, don't forget. There's Hertz, smaller Hertz, and there's also the Cohen edition.
It hurts a lot.
Oh, you've got Cohen, so are you there? Everybody wants to be is there?
86, thank you. Does
George, you
everyone
with me?
need
Great.
Sonsine?
Are you okay?
Everyone's got a prayer book?
Perfect, there you go. All right. Is anybody saying the blessing?
Daniel?
Daniel?
Go on, Daniel.
Why not? Might be working on here.
Yeah, why not? Baruch Adonai Hambarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chavanu kol ha'amim v'natananu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noteinu haTorah.
Thank you. Now you're welcome to stay here, but there might be some time. Okay, it's okay. I say that, and then this very enthusiastic person 20 minutes later saying, Rabbi, isn't it time I went down? No, they're there. Vayera alav Adonai, I've already said that, and Adonai appeared to him. But Elonei Mamre, by the, I won't translate it for him, by the Elons, whatever they are, of Mamre. So Mamre is obviously a place. If you look in an old-fashioned book, it will say a terebinth, sometimes. Well, I don't know what a terebinth is anyway. Sometimes it's translated as oak tree. It appears to be, this is clearly a marker on a road, a well-known, particularly to travellers. You remember that people who travel regularly, roaming nomadic people, have certain markers. And they weren't McDonald's and service stations, they were trees and rocks and things that were unlikely to be moved, obviously, or destroyed. So, I don't know if your translations add anything else to what I've said, but I think here it's probably a reference to trees and to oak, a form of oak of some sort. And it has to be a tree which provides much shade, as we're going to hear in a minute. Anything else your translations add that I haven't said? Okay. V'hu Yoshei petach ha'ohel, and he, this is Abraham, was sitting at the door or the flap of the tent, kachom hayom, in the heat of the day. Now we don't know why he's sitting there, but I can tell you that he's just circumcised himself in the previous chapter, and so the tradition is, the midrash is, that he was recovering from his self-circumcision. And by the way, he wasn't a young man when he did it. Vayisai now, and he lifted up his eyes, Vayar, and he saw. And I make this comment every time, by the way, and I hope I've made it to you. In Hebrew, you have to lift up your eyes and then see. Right? We know how many people walk around with their eyes apparently open, but they don't actually see anything. It's a lovely, I've used this to talk about homelessness and all sorts of things that in our society we don't see. We know it's all there, but we don't really see it. It just becomes part of what we do. And it's the Hebrew metaphor, you have to lift up your eyes and see. It's not only a physical... V'hinei shlosha anashim, and behold, 3 men. Now, I'm going to translate that as anashim, as men, because that's the most straightforward translation. But of course, as you will know from this portion, well, we don't know what they are. Because they appear to be men, it says anashim, and they're going to give a message from God. But the question is, God doesn't usually, particularly early in this book of Genesis, in this early chapters, give messages through men, human beings, give a message through angels, who are neither, one thing or another, neither fish nor fowl, neither meat nor milk, as it were. And as we'll see later on, it becomes relevant. You'll see why that comment's right there later on. So you just hold the word men for a minute, and we'll see how we go on. And it says nitzavim alav. Now, very interestingly, the root nitzavim can mean to stand, but it very often conveys a sort of stationing to do something. Right? Hence, by the way, that we get tombstone in the same root, something standing there. Well, you remember the people atem nitzavim, they're standing there expecting the revelation in the Deuteronomy passage. It's not the root amad, which means to sort of stand around, to be standing. It has a sense of being stationed. And so they've got something to do. I thought it was going to be a long time. And so they had something to do. Anyway, but it says this. Now, it could be that, of course, they're stationed because Abraham, who's probably struggling with his circumcision, actually doesn't realise they're there. We don't know he sees them coming in the distance. And, of course, like angels, they might have just appeared miraculously. Who knows? But remember, we've got an oral tradition that is then written down. So words that we might not think have significance may have significance, or may convey to an audience things that we're not always sure of, because we're dealing with a very ancient language and some ancient redactions of the text. Vayar, and he saw, Vayavot, and he ran, Likratam, to greet them, Mipetach ha'ohel, from the door of his tent. Now, Vayishtachavu arza, and he immediately, literally says, bow down to the ground. Got down on his hands and knees, presumably, which may not be unusual, because that may have been the way in which visitors were greeted.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Plural, ishtachavu. So could be they bow down to him?
No. Well, I'm going to say no, and I'll tell you why. Because you bow in the plural, you bow your faces, that's why. The Hebrew metaphor is panav, not panov. That's why it's in the plural. And so, as you can see, it's a very unusual form of the plural, because it has the vav at the end being both consonantal and vowel. It's a bit odd. So the whole root is odd, but here I don't think it's a plural. It clearly refers to Abraham. But no doubt you could write a sermon on it being the other, but I don't think it would be. You'd get away with it, but I don't think it's right.
I've got you.
Yeah, it's all right. Vayomar, and he said to them, Adonai, not Adoni, Adonai. Now, of course, Adonai here in the Hebrew means my lords in the plural, because there are three of them. But if you think there's an oral audience hearing this, and we know that Adonai also has another meaning, possibly in an oral tradition, you can see, has Abraham yet... So, when you're doing an oral tradition, the question is, whose voice is being recorded? So, are you supposed to know, the fact that Abraham says Adonai is a clue to you out there, that these people are not just ordinary men, even if Abraham hasn't yet realised it. He thinks they're just a plural of men, so he's saying, my lords. But you, the oral hearers, are already thinking there's something strange here, something different here. Possibly. If I found favour in your sight, do not pass by the presence of your servant. Let me give you a little of water, and let me wash your feet. And shelter a while under the tree. And I will take a measure of bread. V'sa'adu libachem, and I will literally feed your heart. But here it means give you sustenance, would be a better way of putting it, I think. After that, ta'avru, you can cross over. Ki al kain avartem al abdechem. And I'm not really sure what this actually means here. I don't know I know how to translate it literally. I don't understand the sense of it. Thus you won't have passed by your servant, is I think what it means. In other words, Abraham's saying, not only do I want you to do this, but it's politeness for you to do it, I think is the implication here. Anything different in your translations? It's difficult to translate this particular that sentence. But if you are, I'm asking you to tell me as we go on. Vayomru, and they said, Ken ta'aseh asher dibarta. Do as you have spoken to us. V'maher Avraham ahola. And Abraham rushed outside the tent, El Sarah, to Sarah. Vayomer Mahari, and he said, hurry. Now, we're not living in an egalitarian society. Abraham wants to entertain his guests. Sarah was also resting in a tent. No notice. She's just told, people have arrived, it's time to cater. So hurry. Shlosh Sa'im Kemach Solet Lushi Asi Ugot. 3 measures of the finest flour, and mix it and make cakes. Ve'el habakar ratz Avraham, and to the not the flock, what's that? Herd, thank you. To the herd, Abraham ran. Vayikach ben bakar, and he took ben bakar means a yearling. What it means here, a son of the herd means a yearling. Young animal. Rach vatov. You wouldn't call me soft, would you? How would you describe it? Tender and good is the meat that's going to come from it. Vayiten el hana'ar, and he gave it to the lad. Vayimaher la'asot oto, and the lad hurried to do with it what was required. Well, I made my joke about milk and meat because you notice here, you're going to see in a minute, there's no milk and meat rules at this point. They haven't yet been revealed, presumably, because in addition to preparing meat, we're going to hear what's given in just a minute. Vayikach, and he took, this is Abraham, chem'ah v'chalav. Chem'ah are yogurty curds from the milk and milk. So he took 2 dairy products. Uven habakar asher asa, and the firstling when it was made. Vayiten lifnehem, and he gave it to them. For who, and he, this is Abraham, omeid alehem, and he stood on them, which means stood by them, which means he waited on them. Tacharait, under the tree. Vayiachilu, and they ate. Have you got a question? Anybody got a question while I'm going through? No? Okay. Vayomru elav, and they said to him, Aye Sarah ishtecha. Where is Sarah, your wife? Well, presumably they knew, if they were God, if they were, as it were, God's representatives, they would have known. So this is a politeness, to bring Sarah into the conversation, presumably. Vayomer, and he said, Hinei v'ohel, she's in the tent. Vayomer. Now we go into the singular. Only appears, if we're concerned about singular plural in this, rather than just scribal, only one person speaks now. Vayomer, and one of them, so whoever the he is here, one of them said, Shuv ashov elecha, I will indeed return to you, ka'et chaya. How you translate this? It's clearly a metaphorical phrase. At a particular time. I don't know what your translation give you any better translation than that.
It just says next
Year, yes. It says, literally it's to do with a time of living. So how you translate that, I wouldn't into good English. V'hinei ven l'sara ishtecha, and behold, a son. You have to put in the English because it doesn't appear there. Will be to Sarah your wife. V'sara shama'at petach ha'ohel. And Sarah was listening at the door of the tent. And she says this rather remarkable phrase. In a minute, I'm just trying to work out. But now you've got Vahu Acharav here. I'm not quite sure the sense of this. I know what it means literally. Oh, and the speaker was behind them, I think it means. Or Vahi Acharav, and she was behind them. The point is, she can't be seen by everybody. That's the point. She's listening in some sense, which presumably would have been the custom that a woman wouldn't have hung around for male conversation. I'm guessing. V'Avraham v'Sarah zekenim, and Abraham and Sarah were old. Ba'im bayamim, they were literally coming of days. In other words, they were old. And then it says, Chadal lihiyot l'Sarah orach kanashim. What's kanashim? I think actually of women. Literally, Sarah was literally, Chadal means stopped up of the way of women. In other words, she was past fertility, is what has to be understood here. That it would not have been expected that she would have a child. Because it says, Vatitzchak Sarah Bekirba, and she laughed, lovely. She laughed Bekirba, in her innards. It's quite interesting when you think about it. She's going to have a baby in here. She laughed to her, but it means, obviously, she laughed to herself. She presumably wouldn't have laughed out loud because the men would have then identified that she was there listening. But she laughs to herself in her innards. Lemor saying, Acharei bilti hayata li edna, v'adoni zakein. After all that has happened, will I have this joy, this privilege, this, how's it translated? Special event. What's it translated in your translations? What word is given?
Enjoyment.
Enjoyment. Yeah. It's obvious because it says, because my old man is old. Let me just find it again, literally. Because my master, my husband, Zakein, is old. So notice, she doesn't say, I'm too old to have a child, even though she probably was, but he's too old. And there is this whole debate elsewhere in modern feminist and other literature about who are the barren ones throughout the... the women get the blame all the time. Whenever the kids don't come, the women get the blame, as they do in royal households. But it isn't necessarily always the problem with a woman, or an issue, anyway. Yes. Thank you. Now where have I got to? Vayomer Adonai el Avram, and God said to Abraham, Lama Sachaka Sarah. Why did Sarah laugh? Lemor, God's saying, is this umnam? Umnam?
Yes.
Umnam, thank you, Ele. Va'ani zakanti. Why would she laugh and not believe and say to her and believe in herself, you know, I'm going to bear a child, I'm old. If Alema Adonai Davar is not anything possible for God. Is anything too difficult, too miraculous for God? And then again, this man says this rather strange. Lemoed ashuv elecha ka'et chaya u'lasara vein. And at the appointed season, I will return at the living time, and to Sarah will be a boy. A child, but assumed to be a boy, probably here. But Techachesh Sarah lemor, and Sarah lied. Lo sachati. I didn't laugh. Ki, we know why. Ki yira'eh, because she was frightened. Vayomer, he said, Vayomer, lo ki tzachakat. I don't understand. Help me with this phrase in the translation. It's not low, it is low.
Nay, but that was laugh. I did not laugh. Therefore, she was frightened.
Right, I got that bit. And then it says, and he then responded, no, it says, you did laugh. Sorry, I misunderstood. Lo was the lo. No, when you said you didn't laugh, a bit of a confusing, because really it's yes, if you see what I mean. But no, comma, exclamation mark, whatever, you did laugh. Thank you. Vayakumu misham ha'anashim, and the men got up from there, Yishkafu al pnei sdom, and they, what's the word? You view something from afar. Looked over on the face of Sdom. Abraham holech imam. And Abraham went with them to escort them on their way. Didn't finish there.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam netzah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Torah.
Amen. Baruch Natan Torah L'Amo Yisrael B'Kedushato. Please be seated. So we're going to have a haftarah.
The haftarah today is from 2 Kings, chapter 4, verses 8 to 37. It can be found on page 782, 782 of the Tanakh JPS, Tanakh of 1999, which is this Fifth Brown. And on page 570 on the older edition with, I think, a blue cover. I didn't look at it.
114.
Is it 114? Is it 114 in the Sonsino? 114.
The prophet Elisha was the prophet Elijah's disciple and companion. It was Elisha who saw Elijah going up to heaven in a whirlwind. What we are reading today relates to some of the miracles that Elisha performed on his own, although it was said that the spirit of Elijah watched over him. And just a couple of things off script which resulted from listening to the Torah portion today. It is interesting, the etiquette of addressing women and men when they are all in the group or thereabouts. And it's very interesting, as you will hear, and I was confused first time I read it, that Elisha, when he has to address the woman who is there, he asks the servant to ask her the question first. I don't know the significance of that, but it is interesting that it happened in both times. And still even more off script, I have to say I found this portion probably unusual. I find it very tender and touching and homely. Probably Elisha was a sort of more down-to-earth man than Elijah. I don't know. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher ahav b'nviim tovim, u'ratzav livnehem, ha'marim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'bocher b'Torah, ובמשה עבדו, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת והצדק. One day, Elisha visited Shunem. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to have a meal. And whenever he passed by, he would stop there for a meal. Once she said to her husband, "I'm sure it is a holy man of God who comes this way regularly. Let us make a small enclosed upper chamber and place a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand there for him, so that he can stop there whenever he comes to us." When they came there, they retired to the upper chamber and lay down there. He said to his servant Gehazi, "Call that Shunammite woman." He called her, and she stood before him. He said to him, "Tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What can you do for you? Can you speak in your behalf to the king or to the army commander?" She replied, "I live among my own people." "What then can be done for her?" he asked. "The fact is," said Gehazi, his servant, "she has no son, and the husband is old." "Call her," he said. He called her, and she stood in the doorway. And Elisha said, "At the season next year, you will be embracing a son." She replied, "Please, my lord, man of God, do not delude your maidservant." The woman conceived and bore a son at the same season the following year, as Elisha had assured her. The child grew up. One day, he went out to his father among the reapers, and suddenly he cried to his father, "Oh, my head, my head." He said to a servant, "Carry him to his mother." He picked him up and brought him to his mother, and the child sat on her lap until noon, and he died. She took him up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and left him and closed the door. Then she called to her husband, "Please, send me one of the servants and one of the sheasses so that I can hurry to the man of God and back." But he said, "You are going to him today? It's neither new moon nor Sabbath." She answered, "It's all right." She had the ass saddled, and she said to the servant, "Urge the beast on. See that I don't slow down unless I tell you." She went on until she came to the man of God on Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her from afar, he said to his servant Gehazi, "There is that Shunammite woman. Go, hurry toward her and ask her, 'How are you? How is your husband? How is the child?' 'We are well,' she replied. But when she came up to the man of God on the mountain, she clasped his feet. Gehazi stepped forward to push her away. But the man of God said, "Let her alone, for she is in bitter distress. And the Lord has hidden it from me, and has not told me." Then she said, "Did I ask my Lord for a son? Didn't I say, 'Don't mislead me'?" He said to Gehazi, "Tie up your skirts, take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer him. And place my staff on the face of the boy." But the boy's mother said, "As the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." So he arose and followed her. Gehazi had gone on before them and had placed the staff on the boy's face. But there was no sound or response. He turned back to meet him and told him, "The boy is not awake." Elisha came into the house, and there was the boy laid out dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he mounted the bed and placed himself over the child. He put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands, as he bent over it. And the body of the child became warm. He stepped down, clapped once up and down the room, then mounted and bent over him. Thereupon the boy sneezed 7 times, and the boy opened his eyes. Elisha called Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite woman." And he called her. When she came to him, he said, "Pick up your son." She came and fell at his feet and bowed low to the ground. Then she picked up her son and left. Eloheinu Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Zur ha'olamim, Tzadik, V'chol charot ha'oyal, ha'na'anayanen, ha'yomer, v'osei, ha'medaber, u'mekayem, shekol dvarav, emet v'tzedek. Ha'Torah, Yal Avodah, Yal Anvim, V'al HaShabbat, Azay, Shulet Tatalanu, Adonai Eloheinu, L'Kedusha V'Limnuha, L'Havot, U'Letifaret, Hal HaKol, Adonai Eloheinu, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך ויפי כל חי התמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו השבת.
We're on page 484. Particularly ask George to read the prayer for the country, and if somebody would like to read the prayer for the community, and if we've got any Israelis or somebody read the prayer for Israel, that would be great. So on page 484, George is going to lead us in the prayer for the country.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
Amen.
Amen. Prayer for the community, something who's not read perhaps? Yes, thank you.
Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members, and all who enter the synagogue to meet, to study and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us and help heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the House of Israel throughout the world, Let those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will.
Amen.
Israel? Thank you.
Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbours, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem.
Amen.
Amen.
Page 486. Yehalelu Shem Adonai, Ki Niskav Shemo Levado. Behold, a good doctrine has been given you, do not forsake it. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Help us to return to you, O God, then we shall return, renew our days as in the past. Pass around a little extract for the Talmud. We've got about 20 copies, so a couple of people I have to share. I'm going to take one myself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
You can share it. Does anyone need any other hands?
You turn over that way. So you know that rabbinic literature is divided, there's lots of ways to divide it. One of the ways to divide it is into what we call Agadic and Halachic. So Agadic is homiletic or story or general ethical maxim, where the rabbis are much more adventurous and courageous and challenging. And Halachic is a legal decision. So I'll give you an example. If you're a housewife or a house husband, you come to the rabbi and say, is this chicken kosher for me, for my family to eat? You do not want the rabbi to say, well, did the chicken come before the egg? Right? Whether the chicken came before the egg is an Agadic story that the rabbis will have a debate about creation and all sorts of other things. But a halachic decision is, this is the chicken and it can be eaten by my family today, or it can't be eaten. Another example, marriage was a good example. People would come to the rabbi and say, is this person suitable to marry my child? They don't want a long debate about romantic love and love for economic reasons. That's all what we call agadic. The rabbis can sermonize about that and be brave about it and say it's God's desire that people should be married, and pictures of God in heaven creating marriages. That's what we call agadic story. The families who are getting married, the two families bringing couples together, as they did in those days, want to know whether this marriage that will take place is going to be kosher or not. Okay? So is there any reason why they can't be married, for example? So do you get the difference? Okay? Sometimes they get muddled up together. And I just realised I was about to introduce this. We have here one that's slightly muddled, as we'll see why. But nevertheless, this is from the Babylonian Talmud. There are two Talmuds. The main one, the one that's studied in Orthodox yeshivot, is the Babylonian Talmud. There is also a Talmud called the Palestinian or Jerusalem Talmud. It's smaller, and it's only studied, ironically, at the Ledbetter College. But it's very interesting, because what it does sometimes is, what's important is the differences. If you just want to know what the tradition says, you go for the Babylonian Talmud, if you're a traditionally styled person. If you want to know why it said it, historically how did it arrive, then you have to look at some comparative literature. And of course, the Jerusalem Talmud, if something appears in one and not the other, or appears in a different version in one and not the other, why and how and so on. Anyway, but this is from the Babylonian Talmud. It's from Tractate Shabbat. It's not about Shabbat at all. It's from page 127, side A. So page 127A. Each page in the Talmud has an A and a B side. So let's just read it. Anybody like to read it in English? I mean, you can read it in Hebrew if you want, but it's not pointed in Hebrew, so it makes it more difficult. But I'm just happy for it to be read in English. Anybody hasn't read it, like to read? So would you?
I'll read it.
Okay, thank you.
The rabbis taught that visiting the sick is one of the mitzvot for which a person enjoys the fruit, but the real reward is held for the individual in what the rabbis describe as the world to come. Rabbi Judah Bashila said in R.S.'s name, in Johannes' name, there are 6 things, the fruit of which one eats in this world, while the principle remains for that person for the world to come. Hospitality to wayfarers, visiting the sick, meditation in prayer, early attendance at the Bet Midrash, rearing one's children to the study of the Torah, and judging one's neighbour in the scale of merit.
Thank you. That's perfect. Now, you can see immediately that this is both halachic and agadic. It's halachic, but I'm not going to do the questions. You can do those at home over lunch. Always leave me something to discuss at lunch. But you can see that this is primarily halachic, because it's saying, what obligations does a good Jew have? What are the most important obligations? By the way, it's a little bit agadic, because the rabbis are beginning to think about life after death and what happens, all right? Which is not really... Well, you can see the difference. People may come and say, am I going to live in another world? But actually, that isn't a halachic decision that needs a legal decision today. That, if you like, is in the area of imagination. Because we haven't got any maps, because people don't return, and so on, in the way that we think them. So, there's a bit of Agadah. It's primarily halachic, but it's not the reason why I want to introduce you. Why have I brought this text today? We're not going to answer those questions, but a few different questions. Why have I brought this text today?
We've got a connection between hospitality to wayfarers.
Good. Yes.
And Abraham sitting up.
Sorry, was I was
Yes.
nodding in a
Right.
sorry.
Okay. So one of the reasons I brought it today is exactly that, because Abraham is known as as hospitality par excellence. Indeed, there's this midrash that his tent was open on all sides. He had He had a tent with 4 doors, one in the north, one in the south, one in the east, one in the west, so that anybody coming from any place would be made to feel welcome, because he could open all of the flaps and they'd see an open flap saying, come in. Now, why this? But notice, by the way, the rabbis taught that visiting the sick is one of the mitzvot. Well, what did our portion? I hinted at what our portion was about at the very beginning. What is Abraham doing?
Recovering from circumcision.
He's recovering from circumcision. In other words, he's sick. And who visits him? God. So there's also an Agadic message here that we Jews are supposed to be godlike. Right? We're supposed to imitate. When it says we're creating God's image, the rabbis didn't believe that God looked like, God forbid me, or indeed one of you, but rather that the Hebrew God was a moral God who carried out moral, who wanted us, now you may not believe this, that doesn't matter, to carry out moral obligations. And visiting the sick would be one of them. So how can God demonstrate that visiting the sick is an important mitzvah? Well, by doing it God's self. And there's your proof text. Now, I want to say a little bit more, because I've got 3 minutes left. Because I want us to be thinking about hospitality, really, more than this is just for you as a take-home for you. But I think this portion is important because it talks about 2 types of society. We only read about one type of society, because we only read 17 verses of chapter 18, namely about Abraham being the Mamre style of society, where visitors and strangers are made welcome. What's the other society that if we'd gone on and read in the chapter, would have been the next type of society we were thinking about? Sodom and Gomorrah, those cities which are eventually destroyed, of course, according to the Hebrew Bible, despite Abraham's negotiations. But what's their problem? Well, it doesn't say that in Torah, but the rabbis think, it just says they're sort of corrupt. Because that's not good enough for the rabbis. What does it mean? And there are lots of midrashim that ultimately the sin of these cities and the sin of Lot, because you've got Abraham and his nephew Lot, the sin of the cities is they weren't welcoming to strangers. And to me there's a message here about the type of society that we want to live in. We can live in a society that is suspicious of everybody who comes from outside, that says to people, you're not really welcome, and that does its very best through bureaucracy and economics and all sorts of other systems to say, go away. Or we can model a society on Abraham, which says to people, initially, you're welcome. Abraham doesn't say, can I see your passport or visa? Doesn't say, have you paid your NHS charge? Says nothing except, let me give you food and drink. It's his first response. And I think we need to reflect, thinking about this portion, what type of society do we want to live in? And what type of society will ultimately be successful? That's a more controversial historical question. My instinct is that the societies which made Jews and other minorities welcome are societies that thrive. Societies that don't want to make people welcome, want to create monocultural societies where everybody's alike, tend to be more authoritarian and tend, in the end, to collapse. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't got some challenges with democracy and with open societies. But I am prepared to say this. For all the challenges that democracy and open society, and they do bring challenges. Of course they bring challenges. Welcoming people who may have nothing or might have lots of riches, by the way, we don't know that. Just think about the refugee, just think about the contribution that those refugees and those Kindertransport and all those other people who came to this country, think about what Germany lost and what Britain and other countries gained it's just one example. But it's irrelevant. It wouldn't matter if they weren't all geniuses. Or they weren't all whatever it is they need to be. The question is, with all its challenges, that democracy and open society, and it does bring challenges sometimes, do we have enough housing? Do we have enough doctors? Mind you, half the people who we need to come in will be doctors, but do we have enough of this and enough of that? How will we cope with all sorts of things? Different cultures which have different mores and so on. All are challenging. I'm not saying it's simple. But when I read this parasha, I'm prepared to say that all the challenges that an open society brings, bring that on rather than its alternative any day of the week.
For our community, so please turn to page 607. Eternal God, we thank you for the gift of life and for the healing powers that you have implanted within your creatures. Sustain that, we pray. And would anyone like to mention anybody that you know of who's in need of some words of healing or comfort at the moment?
Vivian Lacra,
Yes,
my cousin Nikki and her husband Mel, and my friend Lila.
Lila. Okay. She's all the best at a difficult time. I'm thinking of Jeanette Schindler, who's not doing too well at the moment. And Phyllis Sanderson, how's she doing?
She's at home, but recovering very slowly. Still pretty much immobile, but slow recovery. But at least she's home.
No, that's progress.
Yes.
And also Shirley Ariel, who I know she's improving, and hopefully we'll see her soon. Let's hope so. And also Daniel and your family, wishing you strength at this difficult time. Grant them courage and strength to endure pain and weakness. Teach us how best to help them by our love and care for them and by our own composure. May they and who are ill know that you're with them, comforting them and reinforcing their will to get well. May their affliction soon be ended, and may they return in health to family and friends. May it be your will, Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, speedily to grant a perfect healing of body and mind to all who are sick. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei HaCholim. We praise you, O God, the source of healing.
Amen.
Amen.
So friends, I was on target, and in fact Kathleen was still on her feet whilst I just finished. So I consider that to be something that will account for merit in heaven. Meanwhile, we are on page 5. Do you want? I was going to try 519, which is a shortened Aleinu, and perfectly acceptable to do. My colleagues don't do it, I think, because they don't realise it's there. But it's on 519, and let's do a slightly shortened Aleinu today, page 519. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.
Amen.
Baruch Adonai Elohim, Elohei Yisrael, Osei Neflaot Levado, Ubaruch Shem Kavodo Le'olam, Yimalech Kavodo et Kol Haaretz. The eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day the eternal God shall be one and known to be one. May your love, O God, rest upon us, as we rest our hope in you. All the nations you have made shall come and bow down before you and honour your name. Let God be praised by day.
Let God be praised by night. Let God be praised when you lie down. Let God be praised when you rise up.
Avinu Shabbat Yached Shimcha, v'kayem melchutecha tamid, v'meloch aleinu l'olam va'ed. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch l'olam va'ed. Prepare to recite the Kaddish on page 524. And it reminds us of the cycle of life. Kaddish talks about life, or it's not about death. But reminds us that from the moment we're born, we're on a path to our deaths. We don't know how long our life is going to be, whether we're going to be well or unwell, whether it's going to be full of sorrows or triumphs. And in most cases, of course, it's a mixture of all of those things. But we do think particularly at this moment of Karen Brown, wife of Daniel, mother of Miriam, Ruth, and Thomas, forgive me. I have a son called Thomas, and that's his name, but we often call him Tom, but Thomas. Wasn't going to be personally, but I want, you know this, so I don't need to say it to you, but I've heard such amazing things about her as a teacher, and a mother, and a wife, and Cheder teacher here. I met a rabbi actually who worked in a Cheder with her, who told me about some of her work. So of her we really can say that she had less years than she should have had, less years than she deserved, which is often the case. But she certainly seemed to have filled those years with love, example, teaching, inspiration. And I hope that it will give you some comfort to know that. I know that you know it all, of course, in the moments ahead. We also, on the case of the art site, think of the following. Of Gertrude Camilo, Fernando Camilo, mother and aunt of Maria Landau, Ben Green, husband of Frankie, John Landau, husband of Maria, Lily Landau, mother-in-law of Maria, Malcolm Marcus, husband of Kathleen, Annie Pearson, mother of Joseph, Lucinda Rodriguez, aunt of Maria, and Kitty Saunders, mother of Victor. Of them too we say, Zichronam Levracha. May their memories serve as a blessing and an inspiration in the days and years ahead and remind us that the best tribute we pay is to try and live just a little like they lived, and to give a little of what they gave. Let us recite together, in spite of the sadness, the affirmation of the value of human life. Yitkadam. Sorry.
I just also asked that you remember my cousin who died on Tuesday and was buried cremated at Hoop Lane on Thursday, Jonathan Mickler. Thank you.
I'm sorry. No, my fault. I should have asked. Forgive me. So we think too of Jonathan, family cousin, and who I don't know anything about him, but also let us remember him and those who knew him seek to live again. Remembering him and being inspired by him. I should have asked if there are any other names that I omitted. Forgive me. Let us then recite the Kaddish. Yitkadal yitkadash shmei lava, Yalman yivrach Yerusei yamlich malchusei, V'chayechon v'yomechon, V'chayei d'chol Eitz Yisrael, V'agalam zman kari v'meru, Amen. Yehei shmei lava mavurach olam u'lamei almaya, Yisbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'ah, Yitromam, Yitnaseh, Yichata, Yichalei v'lal shmei l'kudusha v'lichu, Ve'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechamata, Amerat b'ma yamaru, Yehei shalom Avraham min Shemaya, Elakol Yisrael v'maru, Osei shalom b'broma, U'yasei shalom, Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'maru, Amen. May great peace descend from heaven, and abundant life be granted to us, to all Israel, and to all the peoples of the world. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. Thank you.
Just a couple of announcements. I'm not panicking because they did seem to be running behind downstairs. I hope I proved correct, otherwise I'll blame Danny. Okay, next Friday I will actually be hosting the Friday night service. It's actually for my dad, my father's Yorkshire, so it will be held at my home, and give me a call, you've all got my number if you want to find out my address. Next Saturday is going to be quite an interesting service. We've got Kathleen actually leading the service. So we've got Reformed Rabbi leading our service, and Rabbi Nathan will be taking the service downstairs. So we've got a liberal rabbi downstairs. Maybe at half time we might have to swap it. I really don't know how it's going to go either way, but that's, hey, it's all about sort of trying to improvise, and there's choices involved in it. Finally, just like to thank Danny, Rabbi Danny, for a very inspirational, thought-provoking service. Thank you very much. You will be asked again, I think.
Good.
Okay, any other announcements? Hannah, Stephen? Okay, closing hymn. Go for it.
Adonai Hashem Adam, B'terem kol Yisrael.